The frontier outpost was quiet that night. Human soldiers were spread across the cold metallic corridors, each one tired from endless patrols. Outside the shielded walls, the barren surface of the alien world stretched into the distance. The twin moons cast pale light over jagged rocks and dunes. Most of the soldiers had gone to sleep, leaving only a few guards at the perimeter. Inside one of the cramped rooms, Ethan sat alone at his desk, staring at a half-finished report. His eyes burned from fatigue, and the hum of the outpost generator was the only sound in the silence. He rubbed his temples, wishing for some distraction from the monotony. Life at the edge of human territory was not glorious. There were no medals, no honor, only long days of waiting for something to happen. He had survived battles before, but now the quiet was heavier than the fighting. He thought of Earth, of oceans and forests, and wondered how far away home really was. Then, without warning, his door hissed open. Ethan turned sharply, his hand going to the sidearm at his belt. No one was supposed to enter without permission. He stood halfway from his chair when he saw her. A tall figure stepped into the room, her silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. She moved with deliberate grace, as though every step was a statement. Before Ethan could demand to know who she was, the stranger unclasped the long robe that draped her shoulders. It fell silently to the floor, leaving her dressed not in casual wear, but in strange armor plates marked with scars of battle. Symbols etched into the armor glowed faintly, patterns unfamiliar yet clearly important. Her eyes, a shade between silver and blue, fixed on Ethan. Her voice was low but steady. "I will not leave tonight." Ethan froze, unsure if this was a threat, a plea, or some kind of alien ritual. He steadied his weapon but did not raise it. "Who are you, and what are you doing in my room?" The alien woman held herself upright, shoulders squared, as if standing before a tribunal. Her hair, dark and long, fell past the sharp edges of her armor. She did not flinch under his gaze. Instead, she bent slowly to pick up the discarded robe, folding it carefully and placing it on the desk between them. The gesture was calm, almost ceremonial. "My name is Lyra," she said. "Once I was commander of the Royal Guard, but now I am hunted. To remove the robe before you means I have abandoned my rank. It means I place my fate in your hands." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He had heard whispers about alien traditions, but nothing that explained this moment. He had not expected an exiled warrior to break into his quarters, let alone one who declared she would not leave. "You can't just walk in here and decide that," Ethan said cautiously. "If you're running from someone, you need to report, to command. They'll know what to do." Lyra shook her head, her expression fierce but not hostile. "Your command cannot protect me. My pursuers will bribe, threaten, or kill anyone who tries. If I had gone to them, I would already be dead. You, human, you are not bound by our politics. You can choose freely. That is why I came." Ethan exhaled slowly, his grip on the pistol loosening though not fully relaxed. He studied her more closely. Her armor bore scorch marks. A cut along her left arm was bandaged crudely, as if she had been fighting only hours before. Her breathing was even, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "You're saying they want you dead? Who are they?" Ethan asked. "The Council of Thrones," Lyra replied bitterly. "The rulers of my people. They fear what I know." Ethan frowned. He had no authority to get involved in alien royal affairs, yet here she was, standing in his room, declaring she would not leave. He thought about calling the outpost commander. He thought about dragging her to the guard post. But another thought held him still. If she was telling the truth, she might not live to see morning. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Ethan lowered his weapon and set it aside. He folded his arms and leaned against the desk, keeping his eyes on her. "Fine. You're here. But if you stay, you'll explain everything. No secrets, no games. If I'm risking myself, I need to know what I'm protecting." Lyra's expression softened slightly. For the first time, she looked less like a commander, and more like someone on the edge of collapse. She sank into the chair opposite Ethan and rested her hands on the table, palms open, showing she carried no hidden blade. I was loyal once, she began. I served the royal bloodline, swore to defend them with my life. But then I discovered their truth. They planned betrayal, not only of my people, but of yours. A secret treaty, hidden armies waiting for the order to strike. When I confronted them, they declared me traitor. My own guard turned against me. Ethan listened in silence. The hum of the generator outside seemed louder now, as though the outpost itself was holding its breath. He tried to read her tone, to sense if this was manipulation or confession. But her words carried the weight of someone who had lost everything. You think I can stop this? Ethan asked. You are human, Lyra said simply. That is enough. The statement puzzled him. Humans were not the strongest nor the most advanced, but aliens often called them unpredictable, difficult to control. Perhaps that was what she meant. Ethan leaned back, trying to measure her sincerity. You need rest, he finally said. You can't keep running like this. Take the bed. I'll keep watch tonight, but tomorrow I'll decide what to do. For the first time, Lyra's rigid posture eased. She gave a slight nod as though acknowledging his authority in this room. Without another word, she placed the folded robe on the edge of the bed and lay down, her armor clinking softly as she shifted. Within moments, exhaustion dragged her into sleep. Ethan sat awake, staring at the closed door, his mind turning over her story. If what she said was true, the entire alliance was in danger, and somehow, by chance or fate, he had become her last refuge. The night stretched on, heavy and uncertain. Ethan kept his sidearm close, his eyes moving between the door and the alien woman sleeping in his quarters. He did not know if he had made the right choice, but one thing was certain. His quiet life at the outpost was over, and as the moons drifted across the alien sky, Ethan realized that nothing would ever be the same after this night. The next morning came slowly. The pale light of the twin moons faded, replaced by the dull glow of a rising sun hidden behind layers of gray dust. Ethan had not slept at all. He sat in the corner of his room with his weapons still within reach, watching over the alien woman who had claimed his bed. Lyra had barely moved through the night. She slept like a soldier, still controlled but also weighed down by exhaustion. When she finally stirred, her eyes opened instantly, sharp and alert, as though no time had passed. She sat up quickly, scanning the room before her gaze fell on Ethan. There was no fear in her expression, only awareness. You watched all night, she said. It was not a question but a statement. I couldn't risk it, Ethan replied. You said your own people want you dead. That doesn't make it easy for me to trust you. Lyra tilted her head, studying him as though measuring his spirit. You do not trust easily. That is good. In my culture, trust is given too quickly, and loyalty is broken just as fast. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Then tell me something. Why the robe? Why drop it in my room like that? You know what it looks like to humans. For the first time, Lyra's face softened with what might have been amusement. I know little of your human customs, but in mine, to remove the robe before another is not intimacy. It is surrender. A commander discards her robe only when she abandons her old rank. It means she trusts the one before her to decide her fate. When I placed it at your feet, I declared myself outside the law of my people. Ethan blinked, trying to process the meaning. So, you're saying that was a ritual? A symbol? Yes, Lyra said firmly. I am no longer commander. I am no longer even a citizen of my people. I am only what you choose to see me as. The weight of her words pressed heavily against Ethan's mind. He had expected a runaway or a spy. Instead, he had inherited a ritual that seemed to bind them both. He wondered if she truly understood what this meant in human eyes. You understand how dangerous this is, right? Ethan said slowly. If my commander finds out, they'll lock you up, maybe worse. You're asking me to protect you against both your people and mine. Lyra's silver blue eyes hardened with determination. I am asking you to listen, and if you believe me, then decide whether I deserve protection. Silence hung between them. Ethan stood and began pacing the small room. His boots echoed against the metallic floor. He thought about the duty drilled into every human soldier: follow the chain of command, obey orders, report suspicious activity. Yet something about Lyra's arrival gnawed at him. She had chosen him, not his superiors. She had trusted him with her fate. And deep down, Ethan felt that trust was not misplaced. Finally, he stopped pacing. "All right, tell me everything. Start with why they're after you, and don't leave anything out." Lyra leaned back slightly, folding her hands in her lap. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had lived too long in shadows. The Council of Thrones rules with silence. They sign agreements with other species, agreements of peace. But hidden in those agreements are plans of betrayal. Armies are being raised in secret. Warships are being built in hidden docks. They prepare to strike not only humans but their own colonies that resist. I saw the documents. I challenged the Council. For that I was marked a traitor. Ethan frowned. "If what you say is true, that's not just betrayal. It's genocide." "Yes," Lyra whispered, "and no one dare speak against them. My own guard turned their blades on me when I questioned the Council. Only one soldier hesitated. I escaped because of that hesitation. Since then, I have been hunted." Her eyes locked with his. "If I die, no one will carry the warning. If I live, perhaps I can convince others to resist? But only with your help. Can I survive long enough to try?" Ethan let the words settle. The outpost suddenly felt smaller, its walls tighter. He knew if the Council truly had such plans, the fragile peace between humans and aliens could collapse at any moment. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Why not someone else? Someone higher up? A leader?" Lyra shook her head. "Because leaders are bound by politics. They calculate risks, balance alliances, and trade lives like currency. You are a soldier. You act on instinct, on honor. That is what I need. Someone who sees not titles but truth." Ethan wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she was right. He had seen leaders trade soldiers' lives for the smallest advantage. He had followed orders that cost friends everything. And he had sworn, silently, that he would never be that kind of man. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp buzz of an alarm. Ethan's head snapped toward the wall where the sound pulsed. He recognized it immediately. Perimeter sensors. Something had tripped the outer defenses. He grabbed his weapon, checking the power cell, then glanced at Lyra. "Stay here, but..." She was already on her feet, her armor clinking softly as she moved. "No, they are here for me. If I hide, you will die. If I fight with you, we may live." Ethan opened his mouth to argue but saw the fire in her eyes. This was not someone who would sit back while others risked their lives. He nodded once. "Fine, but you follow my lead. You're on human ground now." They moved quickly into the corridor. The outpost was already stirring with soldiers scrambling to posts. The alarm blared overhead, red lights flashing. Ethan led Lyra to the nearest viewport. Outside, shapes moved against the pale horizon, sleek figures in cloaks, advancing, with unnatural speed. "Assassins," Lyra hissed. "They will not stop until I am dead." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then they'll have to go through me first." He raised his weapon, the weight of his choice heavy but clear. For the first time in months he felt alive, not bored, not waiting, but standing on the edge of something bigger than himself. Beside him, Lyra drew a blade from her armor, the weapon glowing faintly with alien energy. She glanced at him, her eyes fierce but steady. "Then tonight we fight together." And as the first wave of assassins broke across the defenses, Ethan realized the truth. His quiet life had ended the moment she dropped her robe on his floor. Now he was bound to her fate, whether he liked it or not. The red lights of the outpost pulsed like a heartbeat. Soldiers rushed to their stations, boots pounding against steel floors. Ethan moved with purpose, his weapon steady in his grip, but his mind was on the woman beside him. Lyra matched his pace, her alien blade drawn and glowing faintly in the emergency lights. The energy that shimmered along its edge hummed softly as if alive. Through the viewport, Ethan saw the cloaked shapes closing in. They moved low, their figures blurred in the rising dust. Too many to count at first glance. The assassins spread, out with military precision, surrounding the outpost like shadows converging on a flame. "They came faster than I thought," Lyra muttered, her voice calm but sharp. "You expected them?" Ethan asked, keeping his eyes on the advancing figures. "I knew they would find me," she said grimly, "but not this soon." The sound of gunfire erupted as the outer turrets activated, spitting blue streams of energy across the desert. The first assassins fell, their cloaks burning as they collapsed to the ground. But for every one that dropped, 2 more slipped past the fire. They were skilled, lethal, silent, and relentless. Ethan turned to the nearest squad of human soldiers. "Hold the main gate! Keep your formation tight! No one breaks through!" The men and women nodded, moving into position, their rifles charged and ready. Ethan led Lyra to a side corridor that overlooked the entryway. If the assassins breached, this would be the choke point. As the battle began outside, the air inside the outpost grew heavy with tension. The hum of weapons charging, the bark of shouted orders, the tremor of footsteps, it all blended into a symphony of war. Ethan checked the ammo on his rifle, then looked at Lyra. "Stay close. If they're after you, they'll ignore me until the last second." Lyra's lips curved in a grim half-smile. "Then I'll make sure they regret it." Moments later, the outer gate shuddered under impact. A deafening boom shook the corridor, dust falling from the ceiling. Then, with a crack of metal tearing, the gate gave way. Figures in cloaks poured inside, weapons drawn, moving faster than human eyes could track. "Contact!" Ethan shouted. He fired in controlled bursts, each shot aimed with precision. The first assassin collapsed, armor smoking. The second leapt sideways, rolling into cover. Others darted through the chaos, blades gleaming under the red lights. Lyra moved like a storm. Her blade cut arcs of light through the air, slashing down the first assassin who came too close. Sparks burst as her weapon struck alien steel. She spun with deadly grace, her movements both fluid and unyielding. Ethan covered her flank, his shots keeping enemies from circling around. He felt the heat of plasma bolts singe the air as assassins fired strange compact rifles. One bolt struck the wall near his head, sending shards of metal flying. He ducked, returned fire, and dropped the shooter with a clean shot to the chest. The corridor became a blur of motion. Human soldiers shouted orders, some falling back, others pressing forward. Ethan pushed through the smoke, his focus sharpened to a single thought: protect Lyra. At one point, 3 assassins rushed together, blades raised. Ethan shot one, but the other slipped past, aiming for Lyra. She met them head-on, her blade clashing against theirs. Sparks showered as metal screeched. She ducked under a strike, thrust upward, and drove her glowing blade through the assassin's chest. Spinning, she parried the last attacker, then kicked him back into the line of human fire. Ethan saw the respect in the soldiers' eyes. Whatever doubts they had about her presence began to fade. She wasn't just a fugitive, she was a warrior. But the assassins kept coming. For every one they killed, more pressed forward. The outpost shook again as another section of the wall was breached. The alarms screamed louder, echoing through every corridor. Ethan tapped his comms. "Command, this is Sergeant Ethan Hale. We're under full assault, multiple breaches, unknown hostile numbers, requesting immediate reinforcements." Static crackled in response. Then the commander's strained voice came through. "Hold your ground, Sergeant. Reinforcements are en route, but you're the first line of defense. Buy us time." Ethan cursed under his breath, but didn't hesitate. He turned to his squad. "You heard the man. No one retreats. We hold this." "Line!" The soldiers rallied, forming tighter ranks. Plasma fire lit the corridor, turning it into a tunnel of light and smoke. The assassins pushed hard, but the humans held, every step contested. Through the chaos, Ethan noticed something strange. The assassins weren't just attacking blindly. Their movements had purpose. They ignored most of the soldiers, cutting through positions only when necessary. Their eyes, cold and unblinking, were fixed on one target: Lyra. "They're focused. On you!" Ethan shouted over the noise. Lyra parried another strike and pushed the attacker back. Of course. My death is their mission, yours is only in their way. Ethan's pulse quickened. That meant the longer she survived, the more desperate they would become. He knew they couldn't hold forever. Something had to change. Fall. Back to the inner corridor, Ethan ordered. We'll bottleneck them. The soldiers moved quickly, retreating into a narrower hallway where fewer assassins could attack at once. Lyra fought alongside them, her blade leaving streaks of light in the smoky air. Ethan covered the rear, firing until his rifle overheated. He switched to his sidearm, squeezing off precise shots while reloading the rifle. When they reached the choke point, Ethan slammed the control panel, sealing the bulkhead behind them. For a moment there was silence except for heavy breathing. Then came the pounding of fists and weapons against the sealed door. They'll break through. Lyra warned. This wall will not hold. Ethan nodded, sweat dripping down his brow. Then we'll make our stand here. The soldiers braced, weapons raised. Lyra stepped forward, her blade humming with renewed energy. Her silver blue eyes shone with determination. But Ethan could see the weight she carried. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for something larger, for truth, for survival, for the chance to stop the Council's secret betrayal. When the bulkhead finally gave way, the assassins surged forward again. But this time, they met a wall of fire and steel. Ethan and Lyra stood at the center, their movements synchronized without words. She cut down attackers with precise strikes, while he picked off the ones who tried to flank her. They fought as if they had trained together for years, each covering the other's weaknesses. Hours felt like minutes. The battle raged until the ground itself seemed to tremble. Then suddenly the sound of engines roared above. Dropships descended, blasting the desert with thrusters. Reinforcements poured out, human soldiers in heavy armor storming into the fray. The assassins faltered. Some tried to retreat, cloaks flickering as they vanished into the dust. Others fought to the last breath, cut down by combined human fire. Slowly, painfully, the tide turned. When the smoke finally cleared, the corridor was littered with fallen assassins. The surviving soldiers leaned against the walls, exhausted but alive. The reinforcements secured the area, dragging the dead aside and repairing the breaches. Ethan lowered his weapon, his chest heaving. He looked at Lyra, who stood tall despite the cuts on her armor and the blood along her cheek. Her blade was still glowing faintly, but her hands trembled from exhaustion. You kept your word, Ethan said quietly. We lived. Lyra met his gaze, her expression unreadable. And you kept yours. You fought as if my life mattered. For a moment, silence passed between them, a silence heavier than any words. Around them, soldiers whispered in awe about the alien warrior who fought at their side. Doubt was gone. Respect had taken its place. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The assassins had come for her once, they would come again. And next time, they might bring an army. The outpost was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. The smell of burned metal and plasma still clung to the air. Broken panels sparked in the halls, and the ground carried dark stains where assassins had fallen. Soldiers moved, slowly, patching holes in the walls, dragging wreckage out into the desert. Reinforcement ships hovered above, their lights sweeping the barren land in case more enemies were hiding in the dunes. Ethan stood near the gate, helmet under his arm, watching his squad gather their strength. They had survived the impossible. Yet he felt no triumph, only a heavier burden than before. His mind kept returning to one truth. The assassins weren't here for the outpost, the soldiers, or the supplies. They were here for Lyra. She stood at the center of the damaged corridor, tall and unshaken. Her armor was cut in places, her cheek still streaked with dried blood, but her eyes remained hard and determined. The other soldiers looked at her with something close to admiration. They had seen her fight like a storm, blade moving with deadly grace. To them, she was no longer just an intruder. She was an ally, maybe even a savior. But Ethan could not shake the unease in his chest. Allies could still bring disaster, and secrets could still destroy trust. The outpost commander, a broad-shouldered man named Colonel Hayes, finally arrived from the command ship. His expression was tight, his uniform pressed even in the chaos of battle. He glanced at the ruined gate, then at the exhausted soldiers. Finally, his gaze landed on Lyra. "Sergeant Hale," the colonel said, voice sharp. "Who is this? And why is she in your unit's quarters?" Ethan straightened. He had rehearsed an answer all night, but none of them seemed safe now. "Sir, this is Lyra. She sought protection here. The assassins came for her, not for us. If we had refused her entry, they would have torn this place apart anyway." The colonel's eyes narrowed. "So you sheltered a fugitive alien without reporting it? Do you realize the political fire this could start?" Before Ethan could reply, Lyra stepped forward, her voice clear. "Your soldier saved not just me, but your outpost. Without him, your men would be dead. If you wish to punish him, punish me first." The colonel stared at her, caught off guard by her directness. His eyes flicked to Ethan again, searching for answers. Ethan hesitated, then decided the time for silence was over. "She has something to say, sir," Ethan said firmly. "Something that might matter more than any of us thought." The colonel folded his arms. "Then she'd better say it quickly." Lyra lifted her chin, her silver blue eyes shining with conviction. "The Council of Thrones, the rulers of my people, are not loyal to the Alliance. They are building armies in secret, hiding fleets in shadow docks. They plan to betray not only humans, but their own colonies that refuse to obey. When I confronted them, they named me traitor. That is why the assassins came." The soldiers around them shifted uneasily. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. The colonel's face darkened, though not from disbelief. He had been in politics long enough to recognize when a story rang true. "You're telling me," the colonel said slowly, "that your government is preparing to turn on humanity?" "Yes," Lyra said. "And the proof is hidden in their sealed archives. I had access once. I saw it with my own eyes. They cannot allow me to live because if I speak, others will begin to question. And if enough question, the council's lies will collapse." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle, like stone. He could see the colonel struggling with the same thought. If what Lyra said was true, then everything, peace treaties, trade routes, joint defense pacts, was nothing but a mask hiding knives. The colonel finally spoke. "Do you have evidence? Something we can show the Alliance Council? Words alone won't stop a war." Lyra's expression hardened. "I had evidence, I carried it with me, but it was destroyed when I fled. Only my testimony remains." The colonel cursed under his breath. "Then you've put us in a dangerous position. If I report this, they'll call it propaganda. If I stay silent, they'll call it negligence. Either way, humanity is caught in the storm." Ethan stepped forward. "Sir, we can't ignore it. If we wait until their fleets appear on our borders, it'll be too late. She came here because she believed humans would listen. If we turn her away now, we're no better than the ones hunting her." The colonel's eyes narrowed at Ethan's defiance, but after a long pause, he sighed heavily. "You're not wrong, Sergeant, but you've dragged us into a dangerous game." He turned to Lyra. "You'll be kept under guard until we decide how to move forward. Not as a prisoner, but as a guest under protection. If your enemies return, we'll deal with them." Lyra inclined her head. "That is all I ask." The colonel left soon after, already calling for encrypted channels to the higher council. Soldiers went back to repairing the outpost, though many stole glances at Lyra. She had become a symbol overnight, both a danger and a hope. Later, in the idyad quiet of the barracks, Ethan sat across from her again. The room was dim, the hum of the generator steady. He studied her, trying to read the layers of her calm face. "You told them everything," he said. "Not everything," Lyra admitted softly. "Only what they needed to hear. The rest, I tell only to you." Ethan leaned back, folding his arms. "Why me?" "Because you didn't look at me like a weapon or a liability. You looked at me like a person. That is rare." She paused, her voice dropping lower. The Council's betrayal is worse than I said. They don't just plan to strike, they plan to erase. Colonies that question their rule will vanish. Races that refuse to bow will be wiped out. Humanity is only the largest piece on the board, but not the first. They will test their fleets on smaller targets first. By the time humans realize, it may be too late. Ethan's throat tightened. You're saying we're running out of time? Yes, Lyra whispered. And I do not know how long we have. Ethan sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing on him like armor too heavy to carry. He had thought of himself as just a soldier on a forgotten outpost. Now he was holding secrets that could change the galaxy. Finally, he spoke. Then we find proof. Testimony won't be enough. We get evidence, something the Council can't deny. If that means sneaking into their archives, then so be it. Lyra looked at him with something like surprise. You would risk that? For me? Not just for you, Ethan said. His voice was steady, resolved. For all of us. If humanity is on the line, I won't sit back and wait for the strike. I've seen too many battles lost because we waited too long. For the first time since she entered his room, Lyra's eyes softened. The fire was still there, but beneath it was something else. Respect. Maybe even trust. She nodded slowly. Then we will do this together. The sound of footsteps echoed, outside the door. Ethan turned, hand on his weapon, but it was only one of his squad members delivering supplies. Still, the tension never left him. He knew the assassins would come again. He knew the Council would not stop hunting her, but now the mission had shifted. It was no longer just survival. It was about truth. And as Ethan sat with Lyra in the dim light, he realized something dangerous. Once he carried her secret, there was no turning back. If humanity was to survive, it would not be because leaders saved them. It would be because a soldier and an exiled alien chose to stand together. The days after the attack passed in uneasy silence. The outpost had been repaired, but scars remained. The soldiers worked harder, patrolling in shifts that never ended. The reinforcements had stayed behind, creating a small army where once there had been only a garrison. Still, no one felt safe. Everyone knew the assassins had failed their mission, and failure meant the Council would escalate. Ethan walked the perimeter one evening, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The twin moons rose slowly, painting the desert in pale light. He stopped, to watch them, his mind heavy. He thought about Lyra's words, about hidden fleets and betrayal, and about how fragile peace really was. Humanity had trusted too quickly. Now it seemed the galaxy was about to burn. Inside the outpost, Lyra trained, alone in the courtyard. Her blade glowed as it sliced through the air, each movement sharp and deliberate. Soldiers often stopped to watch her. Some were still wary, but most looked at her with respect now. She had fought beside them, bled beside them. That bond was not easily broken. When Ethan returned from patrol, he found her sitting on the edge of the courtyard wall, her gaze fixed on the stars. You're restless, she said without turning. I could say the same about you, Ethan replied, leaning against the wall beside her. Lyra's eyes reflected starlight, cold and beautiful. I have been restless since the night I left my world. But tonight feels different. The air is too still. The silence is too deep. Ethan frowned. He had learned to trust her instincts. She had been a commander once, trained to sense danger before it came. You think they're coming? They will not stop, Lyra said firmly. And now, they will bring more than assassins. They will bring an army. As if summoned by her words, alarms shrieked across the outpost. Red lights flashed. Ethan and Lyra jumped to their feet, sprinting toward the command center. Soldiers scrambled in every direction, rushing to stations. The colonel's voice thundered over the comms. All hands to battle positions. Enemy ships detected entering orbit. This is not a drill. Ethan's chest tightened. He reached the main screen just as the image came into view. Sleek black warships, cutting through space above the planet. dozens of them. Their hulls bore the unmistakable insignia of Lyra's people. The colonel slammed a fist on the console. So it's true. They've declared war. Lyra stepped forward, her voice cold. Not war. Cleansing. They will erase this outpost and every human who stands in their way, to silence me. The colonel turned to Ethan. Get your squad ready. You'll be the front line again. Reinforcements are on the way, but they won't reach us before the enemy does. Ethan nodded and rushed out. His squad was already waiting, weapons charged, faces pale but steady. He looked at each of them, seeing fear but also resolve. This is it, Ethan said, raising his voice. They came for her, but they'll find us instead. We hold this line no matter what. Not for orders, not for medals, for survival, for humanity. A cheer rose from the soldiers, echoing through the metal halls. Moments later, the sky lit up as enemy ships descended. Fire rained from above, blasting the desert with explosions that shook the outpost to its foundation. Dust clouds rolled across the horizon. Then, in waves, enemy troops deployed. Hundreds of armored soldiers, their movements disciplined, their weapons glowing with alien energy. The ground shook as they advanced. Ethan's squad braced at the main gate, barricades raised, turrets spinning. Lyra stood beside him, her blade humming with deadly light. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with fury. Ready? Ethan asked. Always, Lyra said. The battle began with a roar. Plasma fire streaked across the desert, slamming into barricades. Human rifles spat blue light, tearing through enemy ranks. Explosions thundered as grenades ignited the sand. The air filled with smoke and screams. Ethan fired until his rifle overheated, then switched to his sidearm. He shouted orders, pulling wounded soldiers back, rallying those who faltered. Lyra moved like lightning, cutting down enemies who breached the barricades. Her blade carved through armor as if it were cloth. Every swing left glowing arcs in the smoke, but the enemy pressed harder. Their numbers seemed endless. They swarmed the gate, climbing over barricades, firing from every angle. Ethan fought, with everything he had, but for every enemy that fell, two more appeared. A blast shook the ground near him, throwing him to the floor. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw Lyra standing over him, deflecting bolts with her blade. She reached down, pulling him to his feet. On your feet, human, she shouted. We are not finished. Together they pushed forward, covering each other's flanks. The rhythm they had found in the corridor fight returned, stronger now. She struck with precision, he shot with speed. They moved as one, unspoken trust binding them in the chaos. Hours passed like minutes. The battlefield was littered with fallen soldiers, human and alien alike. The outpost walls were cracked, turrets destroyed, corridors burning. Yet still they fought. Finally, the enemy line faltered. The sound of engines roared overhead. Reinforcement. Ships broke through the clouds, human fighters diving into the battle. Bombs rained down on enemy ranks, tearing their formations apart. A cheer erupted from the soldiers as the tide shifted. The enemy, once unstoppable, began to retreat. Some fled to their ships. Others fought desperately until the end. When the last enemy fell, silence returned. The battlefield was a graveyard of smoke and fire. Soldiers collapsed where they stood, too exhausted to cheer again. Ethan lowered his weapon, his body trembling. He looked at Lyra, who stood tall amid the ruins, her blade still glowing faintly. Her armor was shattered, her face streaked with dust and blood, but her spirit was unbroken. She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. You see now, they will never stop, not until humanity is broken or until truth is revealed. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we'll make sure the truth is heard, no matter the cost. The colonel approached, his uniform torn but his expression firm. He looked at Ethan, then at Lyra. The Alliance Council will hear of this. They cannot deny what happened here. And if they try, then humanity will stand alone. Lyra stepped forward, placing her hand lightly against her chest. If humanity stands, I will stand with them. I swore I would not leave. Tonight proved that vow. The soldiers around them listened in silence. The words carried weight, She was no longer just an exile. She was a symbol of defiance, of hope, of unity between two very different worlds. Ethan felt the truth settle in his chest. The war was only beginning. But tonight, they had shown the galaxy something powerful. Humans would not bow, would not break. And those who fought beside them, no matter their origin, would find a place at their side. As the sun rose over the shattered desert, Ethan looked at the horizon. Smoke still rose from the battlefield, but light pierced through the dust. He knew the fight ahead would be long, bloody, and uncertain. But for the first time, he believed they could win. Because when humanity stood together, when they fought not for conquest but for survival, they became something the galaxy could not ignore. And beside him, Lyra whispered the words she had, spoken on the night she entered his room. "I will not leave. Not tonight. Not ever."